All right. So today we have really another dear friend of mine, and John Strickland, Reverend John Strickland, is an Atlanta, Georgia native. He graduated from Georgia State University in 1974 with a bachelor's degree in mathematics with minors in philosophy and psychology. 2 years later, at the tender age of 23, he graduated from Unity School of Christianity and became an ordained Unity minister. He served churches for over 40 years, from Hawaii to New York. He was the director of Silent Unity from 1984 to 1991. He has been to, I don't know how many Parliament of World Religions as a delegate of New Thought. He is the author of a new book, Think, Feel, Heal, and he is a complete delight to be with. So, Reverend John, welcome to the Rise community. Thank you for being with us today, and we are so glad that you're here.
I am glad to be here. Yay. Thank you for having me. Richard, we go back to, I think, when you were a YOUer and I was the YOU coordinator.
We do go back. In fact, I know Reverend John when the only time I ever saw him, he was only in bib overalls and a t-shirt. Yeah. And they made this man the director of Silent Unity, and I thought that was a stroke of genius. So I've known John since high school. Really, that's a long darn time, right? So yeah, he is literally one of the kindest, most generous individuals I know. He is a delight, and I mean that with all my heart. So, John, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for taking the time to be part of the Rise community.
All right. Well,
so let's talk about your spiritual life. So this is about our spiritual life, and I bring people on that I absolutely believe have important things to say about spirituality, about their spiritual life. So talk to me, how did you get involved at such an early age in your spiritual life?
Okay. Well, a lot of times it's a crisis that brings people into unity. I was only 6 or 7 years old when my father decided to leave us, take half my mother's inheritance, and disappear. And sometimes we'd hear from him, sometimes we wouldn't. Mother was a New Yorker, so I'm considered a half Yankee and a half Southern cracker. Dad was from Georgia, she was from New York. So, but I learned more from her, I think, than I did from him. And she started looking around for a place that she would like. And she discovered, like 1959, a small Unity church in Atlanta with a woman minister. Now, if you can think back to 1959, a woman minister in Atlanta, that was unheard of. But that's where my mother took me, and probably a couple of years later, she taught me meditation. But I do remember I had two brothers, and we were kind of rascals. And I can often remember that teachers saying, "John, now you're a child of God, act like it." And sometimes I didn't. And you know, that was far different than if I would go to Sunday school with friends and the starting point is you're born in sin, you're a lowly, miserable sinner, and that's all you'll ever be. And versus you're a child of God, you're good, and that was such a wonderful thing to me. But I learned that was not the predominant religion in the South at that time, and I did learn that the predominant religion in the South was football. And so I played football, and I was darn good at that, and earned a scholarship to play football at Vanderbilt University. And in my first season as a freshman on a freshman team playing against Alabama, I had a career-ending injury. I had a partially paralyzed neck and shoulder. And so I dropped out of school, came home, felt defeated that I'd let everybody down. And I went back to that little church that I'd grown up in. And they didn't care whether I played football. And so one of the things that I loved about it was the meditation. And my minister at that time, some of you may have heard of, Jay Dishman, I found that the Sunday morning meditation is what meant the most to me. And I began to meditate. And after about 9 months, I was healed, even though doctors said it could not be healed. And so I was back in college then in Atlanta at Georgia State. Originally thought I would be a math teacher and a football coach. And I felt I don't want to coach football, and people get injured playing football. And so with that healing, then I felt the call to ministry. And I remember they did field interviews in those days. And the director of ministerial school came to Atlanta, and some other ministers in the area interviewed me as a sophomore. And I said, I want to go to ministerial school, but after I graduate. And they said, well, we want you to go after you graduate as well. And so actually apply in my senior year of college. And that's what I did. And I didn't know that they would let me in that young. In the history of Unity, probably 5 or 6 people were ordained at 23. So I was one of those. And I think what Jay Dishman, who was my minister and supported me, said, you've had, for a young man, a lot of life experiences that'll serve you well in ministry. And they did. But still, that was pretty young. And if I may tell a story, and I don't know, stop me anytime you want to, but a woman came to see me and wanted a healing. Now remember, I'd had a healing. She had a large mole on her face that was getting larger. It just so happened, even though I didn't grow up with my father, he was a dermatologist. And she said, I want this healed spiritually. I said, I will pray for that healing, but I think you ought to see a dermatologist, have that looked at and taken care of. And it was sort of like, young man, I'm going elsewhere. And she went to the minister of the religious science church, who was just about to retire. So he had many years. I didn't see her again for about 6 or 7 months until I was in a grocery store, and there she was. And I noticed her face did not have that mole, but it had a very thin line where the good surgeon had removed it. And I said, well, it's good to see you. And she said, I was mad at you when you told me to go see a dermatologist. So I went to see Reverend so-and-so on the other side of town. I said, and what did he tell you? He said, go get that taken care of by a doctor. And so she did. So to me, I believe in spiritual healing. So many examples of my years in Silent Unity of people who were healed spiritually, but I also believe that you take authentic action. And that's a very important part of what I believe about spirituality. And, when I go to doctors, I look for a doctor that has a spiritual consciousness, but also a good medical background. So we're going to talk a lot about healing and this book and how I came to write that book and some of the principles in it. So, but I do think you do the spiritual things and move your feet. In the Centers for Spiritual Living, they have a saying, treat and move your feet. Spiritual treatment would be prayer to them. Treat and move your feet. And I think that's good, East and West together. So sometimes today, I might call it integrative medicine or complementary medicine. And my brother, by the way, is a doctor, and he likes the book. He graduated, speaking of graduating with honors, he graduated with honors from medical school at 23. This is a brilliant guy. And both he and my father thought that I had thrown away my brains when I decided to go and be a Unity minister. But they both came around, they came around. So, but I think science and spirituality, they go together, and we'll be a better world and better people and healthier people if we combine those. So I'm talking too much. Where do we want to go from here?
You know how much I think you're adorable. Like, I just think you are just all that. So I could listen to you literally for days. So let's talk about consciousness. All right. So, one of the big words in unity and in spiritual community is consciousness. What does that term mean to you?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I think maybe Phil White was one of your teachers, a very well-educated man, and he did the background of New Thought, not just Unity and New Thought. But in the early days of New Thought, people would use a lot of terms and they never defined their terms. And so you go to a meeting at such a place, they'd be using these terms, but you didn't really know what they meant. And that's what I think Unity with Metaphysical Bible Dictionary and the Revealing Word defined terms. So consciousness is a word we talk, we say consciousness precedes manifestation, or you get in life what's in your consciousness, or your life mirrors what's in your consciousness. That, to me, consciousness is the sum total of all your thoughts and feelings and emotions and dreams and beliefs and your attitudes, and all of that goes to make up your consciousness right now. Now, what happens is something's not working in the body, in our life, and what we want to do is change the outer. But what we need to start with is changing the inner. The inner. What is the thought? What is the belief that has grown into some experience that we may not like? And I haven't had a lot of success in trying to change others or the world. And I guarantee you, changing yourself is not easy, but it's a lot easier than changing others. So all of those thoughts, ideas, beliefs, and emotions, and dreams, and hopes, that makes up what you are at this moment. Now, some of those thoughts you might have had when you were in the womb. Don't know what the parents were talking about, but you're getting it. And if you believe in reincarnation, and a lot do in the Unity world, then for some in previous life, that's an interesting thing that I had a psychiatrist in my congregation once, and he had been in the Marine Corps. And he after he retired, he said, I don't want to deal with anything difficult anymore. So he just made a career after the Marines, helping people stop smoking and losing weight. But he and he routinely told people, don't go to church. It's bad for your consciousness, for your self-image. The starting place is you're a bad person. And he said he always told his patients, don't go. Two of them, sisters, went to him and they said, oh, you got to go to our church. He said, I'm telling you, don't go. And they said, you can't be that closed-minded. Come once. If you don't like it, then we'll never go again. He came and he stayed and became a big supporter in every way. But he worked with me when I was having dental surgery. He said, I can't heal you, but I can help you heal faster and less pain and these sorts of things. And it's really kind of interesting. And then he said that when he goes to conventions for psychotherapists, they never talk about this openly in the meetings, but when they sit at the bar and have a few drinks, then they'll talk about it. Said, well, I was doing regression therapy, taking this person back to when they were a child, and they went to a past life. And he said, we all know about this, but we don't talk about it because we would like to keep our licenses, But it's interesting that sometimes we have some carryover from the past. Well, that's a little scary because that's not in our conscious realm. But what we have is awareness right now from this point going forward. I'm not going to say his name, but there's a wonderful Unity minister who's retired now. Oh, he was a handsome lad and had a great, beautiful church. And he was telling me one time he went to see a woman in a hospital, and she said to him, "What's in my consciousness that I have this?" And he said, "Oh, shut up and get well." And I thought, well, I would never say that to anybody. That's not my way, but I would think it. Stop worrying about what was in this, and for heaven's sakes, don't do that about another. Well, what's in his consciousness? What's in her consciousness? But say, let's go forward from this point. And we have created a life up to now. Well, why don't we take hold of that consciousness and these ideas and move forward so that the rest of our life is the best of our life?
Yeah, that's fabulous. All right, let's talk about you've written a book, Think, Feel, Heal. Let's talk about what are the components of creating a healing consciousness.
Okay, and I want to talk around it a little bit, because one of the great teachers that you and I had was Ed Rabel.
Right.
Ed was a master metaphysician. And he came up with truths. I don't know where he came up with. One of my classmates said, well, this teacher teaches you things you know, but you already knew them. Ed would teach you things that you didn't know that you knew. And he was digging around for healing consciousness. And he looked at all the healing miracles of Jesus, and he came up with 5 components of a healing consciousness. And they are belief, love, willingness, faith, and forgiveness. Now, he called it will, but I call it willingness. Belief, love, willingness, faith, forgiveness. If you take the letters to that, BLWF, I and some others started calling it the Great Healing Bluff. Now, my editors, my students, spouse said BLWFF does not spell bluff. It spells wolf. I said, well, they said, why don't you put a U in there instead of the W? It doesn't work. You could put understanding, and sure, understanding, that helps you get healed, but the components were belief, love, willingness, faith, and forgiveness. Well, me being me, or me being a Unity minister, or me being in the ministry alone, I added some things to that. I added gratitude at the beginning, because when you look at Jesus, and this works for healing, it worked for prosperity. Give thanks before you see the results. So gratitude, belief, love, willingness, faith, and forgiveness. Well, if you look at what Mr. Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, when he did the 12 powers, he had 2 of them that were twins, faith and imagination. So I then sneaked another one in there. And then, of course, I added action at the end. And I have found in my life, and perhaps in the life of others, without being too judgmental, a lot of times we want to sit on our hands and we're going to visualize and we're going to affirm and we're going to do all those things in consciousness. But maybe it would be good to take some action. And I give a story that was very important to me. My mother was the greatest spiritual figure in my life. She died when I was 17. I remember my dad had left when I was 7. So what she died of was colon cancer. In those days, they didn't routinely do colonoscopies. So when I got in my 40s, my brother, the doctor, my dad, the doctor, said, John, you need to have a colonoscopy. I don't know anybody who looks forward to a colonoscopy. And it used to be wait till you're 60. And I had to argue with my doctor in the health plan I was on to go see a gastroenterologist. And he said, okay. And the gastroenterologist said, yeah, you're 44, 45 with a history of colon cancer in your family, you need to be. So that was authentic action. And for whatever reason, I and my brothers tend to make polyps, which are easily removed. But if they grow and not taken care of, they become cancers. So I put it off a couple of years. And I remember, I don't know how many of you have had this. And if you don't want to do it, then that's your business. I'm just saying for me, it was the right thing, the action step. But before I went just totally out, I heard the doctor say, "Oh, that doesn't look good. We will get it on the way out." So boom, next thing I know, they're saying, "You can wake up now. You can wake up now." And the doctor comes in and says, "Well, there was this big polyp and it doesn't look good. And come in and see us Thursday and we'll give the results." So Thursday morning, when the office opened, I called and said, "What'd you find out?" "Well, we can't tell you. You have to come in." My mind, remember what I said, faith and imagination? All right. And it's not a matter of how much faith you have, it's where you put it. And you link that with imagination. And I'm thought, oh my, I've waited too long. Oh, poor me. And so I went to the office there and went to a park. And I sat in the park and I prayed and I meditated. And I went in then to see the doctor when it was my appointed time. And he says, "Oh, you're fine. There's nothing. They're fine." I said, "Well, why don't you tell me that over the phone?" He said, "Oh, if something had been wrong, well, we would have told you that right away." But where did my mind go? Where did my imagination go? Oh, John, a little poor me in that, right? So we got to watch that kind of thought is, well, anyway, so I routinely have my colonoscopies. I'm at an age where some people, they stop doing them. My gastroenterologist thinks come back in 3 years. And so, that's too much. That's too much information. And then it's at the wrong end. I focus on this end and the heart. But I will tell you this, and forgive me for this, Richard, because you might not want to, but when I was being prepped for that first one, I told the nurse, I said, "I don't want anybody doing this to me that I'm not at least engaged to." And she laughed and she said, "Tell that to the doctor." I said, "I don't want him laughing when he's in there." It's like, no. So, anyways, that's a little crude. You would expect more from the director of Silent Unity than that. But
not knowing you, I just, so I want to talk about these steps.
Yes.
That you shared with us: belief, love, willingness, faith. So talk to us what you mean by belief, and how do you live that one?
And this is important because it seemed like we're splitting hairs linguistically or metaphysically, belief and faith. And they're similar, but I think of it this way. And again, Ed Rabel did split them. Belief is more of a head thing. Faith is more of a heart thing, I think. And you need both together. When the thinking and the feeling are together, you have a source of great power. But belief, Jesus said, what? "According to your belief, it is done unto you." And unfortunately, a lot of our beliefs were implanted in us, like culturally, parents, teachers, society, the evening news, that we accept those things and they become in the unconscious. And that's when they're the most dangerous. They used to be, and there still are some, but a great newscaster. And on the evening news, I'm not going to say his name, but he was like our beloved uncle. And when he would say, "The Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta have reported that it is the flu season and it's going to be the Asian flu is here." And at the end of that, like 500,000 people would come down with the flu. And so I think, we had some of that with the pandemic, didn't we? I mean, we needed to take some steps, and some were pro-vaccine, some were against it. Me being in a medical family, I was pro. I got it anyway, and it was a mild case. But the thing is, we get these beliefs. We can only live so long and so well and be so happy. And there's a favorite story of mine. I was Eric Butterworth's associate for a while, And the great Eric Butterworth, Discover the Power Within You. And he used to tell this story about a man that in his family, all the men died before they were 63 years of age. He was in great health. He got in his 60s and he began to prepare because he figured, I will not make it past 63. Good health, got 62, and he began to deteriorate. And sure enough, he died before he was 63. And there were people standing around his grave and they were talking and said, it's just too bad old Joe never knew that he was adopted. So he thought he had a genetic encoding to live fewer than 63 years. But how much of that do we have?
Right.
And it's not just for healing, but you can't be that. You can't do that. You can't, be strong. You can't climb mountains. You can't write books. You can't make a living as a minister. So, I mean, how much of that stuff do we just take in? And it's about our bodies. It's about our bodies. There was a wonderful friend of mine who, in her family, people had early onset of Alzheimer's. Now, she was sort of a radical person. You'd love her. Every one of you would love her. But a lot of what she got was, why can't you be more like your sister? Like, she's normal and you're not. And her husband said, why can't you be more like your sister? Well, as it turns out, her sister called one day and said, I'm not remembering things well. Could you come and let's sit and let's talk? And by this time, and this person was from a heritage from Middle Europe. And in this area, a lot of people had early onsets of Alzheimer's. So this woman thought, wow, and everybody said, why can't you be more like your sister? And there was an interesting thing. A young man fell in love with her. And she said, we can't do this. There's a test coming available, and it may show that I will have early onset. And the sweet thing was, he said, I don't care. I love you the way you are, and I'll be with you. And she took the test, and turns out that the gene for that early had skipped her. But how wonderful that the man, said, he's a keeper. He's a keeper. And yes, I did do their wedding, and it was a beautiful thing. But you see the power of belief. And in our world, we have given a lot of power to doctors. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have that or they haven't earned that. But if they tell you have a few months to live, you tend to prove them right.
Right.
So it's the belief that we have. And I was teaching this once, and a woman put her hand up. She's waving her hand, says, I have a question. I don't like when you talk about belief, the power of belief, because if you look at the word belief, in the middle of it is the word lie. And I said, exactly, that's what I've been saying. We have believed lies about ourselves. And it takes some work. And I will tell you, the value of having a spiritual community is they help you believe when you couldn't believe in yourself. That's what happened to me after I left football. I was having a hard time believing in myself. And again, these people were sort of like that man that wanted to marry the woman that said, we don't care if you play football, we love you the way you are. That's one of the greatest things in the world, isn't it? And guess what comes after belief? Love. If you have love, you can conquer anything. If you don't have love, my opinion, life isn't worth living. And sometimes the hardest one to love is yourself. And so, I've been in therapy. I admitted that to my congregation. They almost fell out of the chairs. But it was about the times when I couldn't believe in myself. And my doctors say, ask for help and to believe in yourself. And what happened is when I told the congregation that, they loved me all the more. But then everybody in there that was having a hard time believing in themselves came to see me. Like I couldn't handle all those people coming, But sometimes people make up a story about the minister, and I've actually had them say, "Well, I know you tell these stories about you and the challenges you, and I know they're not true, but you're just telling us that to make us think you're one of us." I said, "I am one of you. What are you talking about? I am one of you, and what I share is what I have found that helps me live a better life." And that's what I love about unity, by the way, and the Fillmores. Say, here's what we found that makes life better. If it works for you, take it. If any part of it works for you, take it. And put the other side. Don't waste your time arguing with it, fighting with it. Take what works for you and makes your life better. And belief in a group that comes together is such a wonderful thing. And that is part of loving. Loving is the desire for only good to come to you and all other creatures. Wow. And sometimes the hardest one to love is ourselves.
Yeah.
And so
Can you talk to us about authentic action again? Can you
Okay,
give
we'll
us a
get to-
little bit more about that?
authentic action. This is where, in my opinion, I was sometimes lacking, and sometimes in new thought, people are lacking in that. We know that life is consciousness, and your consciousness will change your life. And yet there are still steps that we need to take. Remember, Jesus sometimes put some clay on the eyes and said, "Go do what? Wash it off. Go make your sight better. Take a step." And one of my favorite Bible stories is the pool at Bethesda. And you can still go there in Israel, whether that's the authentic site or not, I don't know. I like to think it is. Look, there's this man who, 38 years, and he's there at the pool, and when the angels would come and stir it up, it would have healing properties. But others always seem to get in the pool ahead of him. And so Jesus came to him and said, do you want to be well? Are you willing to be well? Sneaking that in there, Richard. And it was like, man, he's called on his stuff, because 38 years, unless you forget, think of Methuselah and Abraham and Sarah and stuff. 38 years is a long time to live there, and people had to take care of him. They had to get him food and shelter and clothing and things like that. So wasn't great, but he was alive for 38 years. And he says, okay, you want to be well? Take up your bed and walk. Do something. You're sitting there, get up and do something. And so you have to do something. And I'm not saying it's always a doctor. I'll tell you a funny story, but I was taking this meditation class with an Indian group, the Art of Living. And I'm a big guy, and I've had, stuff from left over from football, things like that. And I said, by God, I'm going to sit cross-legged for 30 minutes of meditation in this class. Well, then my right leg got numb. Well, it went away. So then the next week, it got numb, and it took longer to go away. And finally, it didn't go away. And I said, all right, I'm going to look in the phone book and find a chiropractor with an Indian sounding name, because the chiropractor would then understand what I'm trying to do. And this is a marvelous woman, Dr. Patel, very Indian sounding name, just in the neighborhood. She takes x-rays. She does all this kind of stuff. And she looks at me and she said, John, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm sitting cross-legged in meditation. She said, John, sit in a chair. I said, but the old people sit in chairs. She said, John, with your back, what you've done to it, and your size and your weight, sit in a chair. All right, she did what she did to manipulate the spine and get that doing well. And she was great. And she was right. When I meditate, I sit in a chair. Am I sometimes envious of the people who can sit cross-legged for 30 minutes? Yeah. But I like meditating, and I think they gave me a pass at this meditation course that I could sit in a chair. So, Charles Fillmore called that uncommon common sense. Do what you know that pushes you in the direction of healing. That's what I say about this book, by the way. I'm not saying I'm going to have a tent revival and kick crutches away. This will push you in the direction of healing. And if you need to walk and you need to do yoga and you need to exercise and you need to eat healthier, and who among us doesn't, do it. Do it. And I think in some ways, taking those authentic action steps begins to convince the consciousness that you were serious, that you are serious about being well. Might also be, because I think these principles work very well for prosperity. Do what spend less, put some aside, tithe, do these kind of things that push you in the direction of prosperity. You're developing a consciousness of wholeness, which includes the body, the mind, the spirit, the bank accounts, all of that. So the authentic action is, I think, I don't know why some people have resistance to that, but I think it's one of the things. If you want to be well, you will take that authentic action. I'll tell you a story about another person who came to see me, and she was insulin dependent diabetic. She said, I want you to pray, I'm going to stop taking my insulin. I said, I want to see you whole and well, but do not do that unless you are on a medical supervision with a doctor who knows what they're doing about diabetes. Don't do it. I had a colleague that was my associate at one time who 15 years had been on dialysis. And she was able to get off dialysis. That never happens. But using unity principles and taking authentic action. Now, for goodness sake, she jumps out of perfectly good airplanes. She scuba dives down in the ocean. Man, all the stories about sharks and stuff like that. I don't even want to dip my toe in the water. Come on. Now that's all right. Did I get fear put in me from all the news reports and all that? I don't live by the ocean. I live by a lake, but I like that. And I like the ocean. But the point is, be sensible. Be sensible. Don't contradict what you know to be true about health and healing while you're trying to do your spiritual techniques. Do them both.
Okay, do you believe that healing is always possible?
I sure do. I believe it's always possible. And now, I'm going to say, because I mentioned this in the book too, sometimes healing might take the form of passing over to the other side. And so you shouldn't feel like somebody was defeated. There was a time in the history of unity when if a person passed, they thought, oh, they weren't a good unity student. And then Myrtle Fillmore, our beloved Myrtle, I think was the great spiritual foundation of unity. And Charles tended to be more of the business administration. But Myrtle said, my work here is done. And I have work to do on the other side. People said, no. So what happened was the whole movement was in uproar after she passed over to the other side. And said, we got to rethink this. There's another one. I shouldn't tell. This has nothing to do with this, but at one time I was married to the great granddaughter of the founder of Unity. Her father was the son of Rickert Fillmore. Now, at this time, Charles, as he'd gotten older and his beloved Myrtle had passed on, he was teaching celibacy. That the goal was not reincarnation, but regeneration. And suddenly, Charles Rickert Fillmore was born. And people ran to his father, Rickert, and said, hey, your father is teaching celibacy, and now you had a son. How do you explain that? And he said, well, I don't believe everything he teaches. So, so and isn't that wonderful about unity? You don't have to believe everything that I teach or Richard teaches or anybody teaches. You're a God being. And you have God-given intelligence in you. And like my teachers told me when I was misbehaving in Sunday school, you're a child of God. Now act like it. Act like it. But use that. Tune into God. And you might be directed to someone who has a wonderful healing technique that is just the one for you. So, people today have more agents of healing than ever before in the history of the world. But you have to use your guidance. Pray to God and go to people as you felt guided to. Just like I looked in the phone book for Indian chiropractor who knew just what to do for me, and looked me in the eye and told me, sit in a chair. And I haven't had trouble with that back. So, but would I really like to, I go sometimes to a yoga class and like to be doing what they're doing, but they're not. As they tell me, yoga is not a competitive sport. I happen to think it's a good healing dynamic. So anyways, take authentic action. Don't make excuses for not taking that. I think it was Mark
about the
Twain.
Parliament of World Religions.
I will do that. Parliament is going on now.
It's about to start, right?
And tomorrow I'll be going to Alaska, so I missed it this year. And it's in Chicago, which is where the first one started. And we were in South Africa together.
And Barcelona.
In Barcelona, man, that was that's where I learned to eat paella. And you bought us all paella. Boy, that was good. But the funny thing about the Parliament of the World's Religion started in the 1890s.
I think there might have been a little sangria in that paella too.
Yeah. Well, the first one was in Chicago, something like 1893, and the Fillmores went. But there was Swami Vivekananda was invited there. And the Western world did not know much about the Eastern teaching. They'd heard about it. They'd read about books and things like that. And they thought it'd be a big joke. We'll have him there and everybody will laugh at him and that. Well, he wowed them. He absolutely wowed them. So, I have a guru. I mean, it's not the way like Eastern people, but Sri Ravi Shankar. And he's been to several parliaments. And he invited me to his ashram in Boone, North Carolina, to talk to the Hindus and particularly children about the spiritual meaning of Christmas. And then afterwards, they put me in a red suit and had me give out candy to these little kids who knew even less than American kids, like, what is this guy in a red suit and a white beard and all that? And then I had a private meeting with His Holiness. And I had been to Israel just a month before. So I had an olive wood heart from Bethlehem that I was going to give to him. And in this private meeting, and he graciously accepted, and he gave me a meditation candle holder. And then he said, this is the moment I was waiting for of the great spiritual message. And he said, John, do you know why Santa Claus is always a man? I said, well, no, I don't. He says, because no woman would wear that same outfit year after year. And that was the extent of my wisdom that was imparted to me from a person millions of people regard as a living saint of India. But anyways, so I digress. But so just remember that if you want to know the wisdom from, I think, Richard, he may have over 100 million people who have taken courses from the Art of Living, and he has gone to jails and teaching them, and he's soldiers with PTSD and a wonderful man. But what I got was Santa Claus is a man. So that was it. I'm sure if I pray about that, I will learn the deeper meaning of that. But
Well, let's open this up. I want to open this up. Does anybody else have a question for John today? Go ahead, Colleen.
Yes, thank you. I've so enjoyed listening to you. You're so energetic, and you have such a beautiful countenance. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
I was sort of taking notes. Can you just speak, talk a little bit about willingness and how forgiveness plays into healing?
Ooh, two of my favorites. I have changed will to willingness. Charles Fillmore said will is a faculty of mind, but there's a big difference between being willful and willing. And I have noticed in my mind that I am awful willful. I want to tell God how to do God's business, particularly pertains to my body, my life, my pocketbook. And it's far better to let go and let God be God. So in my daily prayers, I pray for willingness, forgiveness. Oh my goodness. And I will share this, it's in the book, but I will share this, that I think it's a vital component of healing. And I've talked to people sometimes struggling for healing, and they might say, well, if you knew what he did to me, you wouldn't forgive him either. And I would say, maybe not, but then I would still be holding the illness in me. It's like you've got a garden hose and you bend it so water can't get through it. You've got to do that. And again, you may not want to forgive, but if you can be willing to forgive. And what I do is I take an affirmation that is familiar to us in unity and work it several ways. But I love you, I bless you, I appreciate you, I forgive you, and I release you to your highest good. And people say, well, what if you don't? I said, exactly when I need to use it. And I might have to do it hundreds of times I get the charge away from this. I want to get back. I want to hit him back. He did this to me or she did this to me, and I'm going to do. And then so that's the first. I love you. I bless you. I appreciate you. I forgive you. And I release you to your highest good. And then I turn it around to, I am loved. I am blessed. I'm appreciated. I'm forgiven. I'm released to my highest good. And people will say, well, what if I don't want to do that for you? I said, the God self, the Christ self, the Buddha self in them will. Maybe not the personal ego. And then over time, I added a third way. And I would say, you love yourself, you bless yourself, you appreciate yourself, you forgive yourself, and you release yourself to your highest good. And I realize a lot of times people hold stuff against me that they really are mad at themselves. They don't like themselves. And I just happen to get away with it. And then finally, guess what I do the fourth way? I love myself. I bless myself. I appreciate myself. I forgive myself. And I release myself to my highest good. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes that's hard. And sometimes at the end, I'm not a great singer. If you've ever been around me at a conference and heard me singing, you know that's not been my gift, although I have taken lessons, got better. But Janet Manning wrote, I am free, I am unlimited. So when I do those four things, then I find myself going into, I am free, I am unlimited. There are no chains that bind me. I am free, I am unlimited. Right now, right now. Isn't it a beautiful song of affirmation, countering all the beliefs that we've had that we are not free or unlimited and we are bound in this? Love that song. I love Janet, a great friend of mine. So the forgiveness is my work on me. And I have to sometimes say the affirmations more times than I would care to admit, because I can be stubborn. Let's just say I'm letting go of my stubbornness. I'm being willing. But my history has been that I've needed work in that area. And so this healing to me, maybe if there's nothing else you get out of this, that forgiveness and having something to do with my mind, which is my greatest gift from God, but is sometimes not my best friend. When I will gnaw on that bone like a dog, and let it go, let it go, let it go. I am free, I am unlimited. There are no chains that bind me. I'm free. I am unlimited right now, right now.
Okay, Betty, what's your question?
So thank you, Reverend John, for all of your thoughts about healing. I really believe that I was given quite a few gifts regarding healing just coming in. So I really appreciate hearing you talk about this. And I have noticed lately, as I'm working on mindfulness, and spending as much time as possible in mindfulness, which now I've gone from 3 minutes to 10 minutes at a time. And that's taken a couple of years. I realize that the healing that I'm looking for now seems to be a lot of mental and emotional healing, which mindfulness is particularly helpful with. And I just like your take on that.
Well, I love mindfulness, and I live half the year in Sun City, Arizona, and Tucson, half the year here in the mountains of North Georgia. In Sun City, there is a mindfulness meditation group. And what I absolutely love about that is I'm not the leader of it. I go and I show up, and we have a little discussion. Maybe we're discussing a book that we're all reading together. And then we sit in the silence for 20 minutes. Then we walk in the silence for 10 minutes. And then we sit in the silence for 20 more minutes. And it is so wonderful not to have to be their minister. And some have found out that I am a minister, like some in that group actually go to Unity in Tucson, where I go when I'm in Tucson. But mindfulness, so that you are learning to be in the present moment without regretting what happened in the past, or fearing or planning what the future is going to be. I was always taught you have to plan and organize and staff and direct and all that sort of stuff. And then someone said, well, you want to make God laugh, show her your plans. Well, it's not either or, it's both and. But to let God in the process, and these people in mindfulness are not really talking religion so much, but it is a wonderful spiritual thing to be with people that are practicing mindfulness in the present moment. And we have a wonderful place where we do this outside a clubhouse. And once I heard a rustling to my right, and I looked, and there was a big javelina. Do you know what javelinas are? This was a big one. Was drinking water, and like 10 feet from me, and I stared at it. You're never supposed to stare at a wild animal. They take that as aggression, but he then when he saw that I was looking at him lapping up water, and he turned and he ran. But it was like I was being a little nervous about next to a javelina. It's probably 50 or 60 pounds. Do all of you know a javelina? There's a wonderful children's book, Don't Call Me Pig. They're a member of the deer family. They're not a member of the pig family, but that I'll always remember that mindful meditation where we're sitting there in the background of the beautiful Catalina Mountains, and gosh, I want to just depart for a minute that I've always taught meditation and learned it from. But 30 years ago, there was a wonderful Unity minister. He and I were roommates at a minister's retreat, and that's Richard Levy. And I don't know if you knew Richard, but he was completely unique, amazing, a bundle of joy and energy. And his wife had gone to a Vipassana retreat, came back and said, Richard, don't talk to me first thing in the morning for 30 minutes because I'll be meditating. So he said, well, as long as she's going to do it, I'm going to do it. And so when he were roommates, Richard says to me, John, don't talk to me first thing in the morning for 30 minutes because I'll be meditating. And I kind of went, Richard, don't do that. He said, don't you do that. He said, this is how I got there. At that point, and that's been about 30 years, I said, I will never miss a day of meditation. And I haven't. And that was such a wonderful thing for me. Not that I was special or anything like that. And I remember Richard, when he was preparing to leave this body, and to look at him, he was one of the healthiest, fittest, I mean, he had that body and he was in his hospital bed. And I said, Richard, I want to thank you for that. You probably don't even remember that. From that day forward, I have never missed a day of meditation. And if you want to take positive action, never miss a day of meditation. That's what I would recommend. But again, the concept of mindfulness, we missed a lot of what's going on around us. There could be a javelina drinking out of our fountain, and we just miss it if we're not mindful.
Isn't he adorable? Come on. He is just a spiritual teacher of spiritual teachers. He is, I've known him 89% of my life, pretty much.
Yeah.
And John, Reverend John, you are absolutely an amazing soul who has blessed more people than we can even realize. And so God bless you. Thank you for being on the Rise community today. Thank you for being a part of our spiritual life, and your insights, your inspiration, your teaching really just makes a difference. And one of the things that you taught me that I still use to this day is Jesus's teaching in 3 statements. And Jesus taught 3 things. He taught love, don't judge, and when you mess up, forgive.
That's it.
And when you taught that Jesus's whole message could be boiled down to 3 things, I never forgot it. So
thank you for remembering that.
Absolutely.
Great teaching.
I use it all the time. And most of the time I even give you credit.
Well, it was a Catholic nun who taught that to me. And I said, why did I never hear this in seminary or in the books I read and all that sort of stuff? But it was beautiful.
It's true. 3 things, right? Jesus taught to love, don't judge, and when you mess up, forgive.
And you don't have to be a Christian. You could be a Muslim, a Hindu, a Jew, a Jain, or anything, and it still works. It still works.
It's spiritual principle.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, John. Thank you very much for being with us. You are such a light, and we are so blessed by your conversation with us today.
But you're very welcome. God bless you.
Okay. All right. So next week we have Rabbi Julie will be with us, and she's going to be talking about how to think like a rabbi. So if you've ever wanted to be a rabbi, if you ever thought you wanted to be a rabbi, this is your opportunity to learn how to think like a rabbi, and you will love her. She is wonderful. All right, you guys. God bless you all. Have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you with Reverend Julie or with Rabbi Julie next week. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.